classical linguistic objects.
Greetings from Cyberdelic Space. I'm Lorenzo, and I'm your host here in the Psychedelic Salon. Today we're bringing you the first of the Burning Man 2005 talks, and it's the one given on Friday afternoon by Daniel Pinchbeck. But before I play it, I guess I ought to break the bad news to you right now. I'm sorry to have to report to you that there were only 3 or 4 of the talks that were actually recorded this year. The only talks I know of that we were able to capture were the ones by Daniel Pinchbeck and Eric Davis. Plus, I think there's part of one of Bruce Damer's talks and Raphael's talk, although I don't have those two in hand yet. Bruce tells me he's planning on re-recording his again in a studio, so hopefully we'll have access to that and be able to get it out to you as well. There's some more I'd like to say about this year's burn, but I'll save that until after we hear Daniel's talk, because I know that's what you really came here for today. And as you already know, since you've obviously downloaded this podcast, the title of Daniel's presentation this year is How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Dimensional Shift. Now, after Daniel's talk, I'll give you some more information on what he's up to these days and how to find him on the web. But now here is Daniel Pinchbeck delivering his Maps Palenque Norte lecture at the 2005 Burning Man Festival.
Thing to be doing here. I mean, this dome is incredible, and you all look really amazing, and it's just so fun to be up here and talking. So I wrote a book that was called Breaking Open the Head, and the book is both like personal and kind of philosophical, and it sort of charts my shift when I started as a kind of secular materialist journalist and got interested in studying psychedelic drugs when I was in my late 20s and shamanism, and went to a bunch of indigenous cultures to explore their rituals. I went down to Gabon in West Africa and was initiated into the Bwiti tribe, taking Iboga, and I visited the Sequoia Indians in Ecuador, taking ayahuasca, and the Mazatecs I visited in Mexico and Oaxaca, and also explored, more sort of non-ritualistic, hedonistic use of psychedelics. And the whole experience was an incredible opening for me, opening me to all of this sort of new information, visionary experiences, and it really completely changed my perspective on reality over time. And I ended up, sort of converting from the materialist perspective that I'd started from to a kind of thinking that the shamanic vision of reality was absolutely more accurate than the Western materialist view. And that was a very profound shift, and it was also kind of a frightening thing to contemplate, because our society is so invested in industrialization and materialism. It just seemed that suddenly this huge aspect of reality, which was the whole kind of intuitive, magical domain, had just been negated by our system. So I just really had to mull on that for a long time. And that kind of led me to start working on the second book, which is called 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl, which is hopefully coming out, well, it's definitely going to come out in the spring, April or May. Basically, I started to take seriously, it's like if I'd converted to this shamanic perspective, then I sort of had to take seriously what all these cultures said about what's happening in the world now and what's going to happen. And I especially got interested in the Hopi prophecies and the material on the Mayan calendar. And part of the whole process for me was like this kind of personal process where as I got deeper into exploring all of this stuff, I had to learn also to take synchronicities that occurred in my own life increasingly seriously, and just become more and more tuned to sort of patterns that emerged over time. And so, for instance, one thing that happened to me is I'd edited a book that a friend of mine wrote. It was a book-length poem about ranting against corporate globalization and the oil companies, and also talking about using ayahuasca, and also talking about 2012 in the Mayan calendar. How many people know 2012 or have read about it a bit? So some of you haven't. So basically, I guess the first person to kind of explore it was Jose Arguelles, but the Mayans were a culture that was really obsessed with time, and they had these incredible calendars that were sort of like synchronometers, kind of following the movements of the planets, and just measuring huge cycles of time. Gosh, is there no way we can let a few more people in? I just feel so sad to see all those like faces out there. Okay. Anyway, yeah, you want to come sit on the podium? That's great idea. I don't know. What's that? Oh yeah, come in from the side. That's a great idea. Come in from the side. You can sit up on the podium. I like that. Yeah. There's stairs in the back. Yeah. A lot. Looks pretty strong to me. Okay, so anyway, so I looked at this, and I'll get back to the Mayan stuff. But basically, a lot of their cosmology seems to point to this end date in 2012, December 21st, 2012, as being this incredibly significant moment. And they really memorialized it in their stone structures, and kind of pointed towards it and alluded to it in a lot of different ways and different levels. So I was editing Michael's book, so we talked about 2012, and for him, his thing was that, we're headed for this total industrial apocalypse, and sort of envisioning, what would happen when the oil ran out and the whole thing went to shit. And I sort of put off editing the book because I didn't really want to deal with it, and I was in my house in downtown Manhattan, and finally I was like, all right, I've got to work on Michael's book. And it was in the morning, I opened the book, finally started, thinking about it and making line notes, and after about 15 minutes, there was this weird thud outside of the window, and we opened the blinds, and there were the World Trade Towers burning down, and the book was already titled World on Fire. So that, for me, was one of many, really significant kind of synchronicities that just led me to feel that whatever investigation I was making was somehow a really important one, and that there was, something to this whole Mayan calendar stuff, and so basically I'd started to think about this whole shamanic reality and wondering how there might be, if it was legitimate, I thought there had to be more manifestations of it in the real world, and kind of almost out of giving up. I also got very into, after editing Michael's book, worried about the whole this sort of collapse of the ecological systems, and the sense that we are headed for this incredible breakdown point through the global climate change and the depletion of the oil and so on. So in the midst of my kind of despair over all this stuff, I started looking into the crop circles, which I'd always kind of assumed were a hoax. But, when I began to look at them, I realized that they developed into this huge phenomenon that had become incredibly complex. And the glyphs themselves were just amazingly beautiful and extraordinary. And I got an assignment from Wired magazine to write about the crop circles. So I had an opportunity to talk to all these people who've been researching them for years, people who completely debunked them, scientists who had also been studying them and had done work on how the plants were affected in the formations. And the one guy I talked to who I kind of enjoyed the most was this guy Michael Glickman, who was a former architect who moved to England and retired and spent 10 years just studying the crop circles. And when I talked to him, he was like, look, this is what I think is going on with these things. He ran down a little bit why he didn't think they could possibly be hoaxes, which I can explain in more detail if you want. And then he said that he felt that they were indicating a dimensional shift, and that this shift was going to culminate in 2012. And that some of the crop circles had been synchronized, had shown, dates relative to the Mayan calendar, including one that had appeared in the late 90s, which was a